Hi everyone. I'm really glad you've stopped by. And before we dive into this exciting story, please subscribe to the channel. A poor girl offers a ring to a young billionaire and says, "Please, give me any amount. I need to save my mom." But when he reads the name engraved inside the ring, he starts crying uncontrollably. The rain tapped against the window when Sophia woke up that morning. It wasn't the sound of water that woke her, but her mother's cough from the next room. It was already the third night that Jessica had spent with a fever. "Mom!" Sophia called, entering the small bedroom. The faint light filtering through the cheap curtains showed Jessica lying on the bed, her face pale and strands of hair stuck to her forehead from sweat. She struggled to open her eyes. "Good morning, my dear." Her voice was weak. "Can you bring Mom a glass of water?" Sophia ran to the kitchen. At 5 years old, she already knew how to manage on her own when necessary. She carefully filled the glass so the water wouldn't spill and, holding it with both hands, carried it to her mother's room. Jessica took a few sips and lay back down. "Do you feel better today?" Sophia asked, touching her mother's forehead, just as Jessica used to do for her when she was sick. "I will," Jessica smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "I just need a little more rest." Sophia understood that it was more serious than her mother wanted to admit. She had overheard Jessica's phone conversation the day before with a neighbor about not being able to afford the medicine prescribed by the doctor at the free clinic. "I'll draw a picture for you," Sophia said, and went to get her colored pencils. In the tiny living room, which also served as the kitchen, she opened her school backpack and, while searching for her drawing pad, accidentally knocked over a stack of papers and envelopes that Jessica kept on the shelf. Bending down to pick up the scattered items, her gaze fell on a small wooden box that had fallen from the top of the stack. She had never seen it before. Curiosity got the better of her, and Sophia opened the box. Her eyes lit up. Inside lay a gold ring with a small blue stone that sparkled even in the dim light. It seemed magical, like something from a fairy tale. She held the ring up to the light and noticed engraved letters inside. Slowly, she tried to read, "Jessica Moore." "This is Mom's," she whispered to herself. Sophia had never seen her mother wear jewelry. In fact, they had so little money that Jessica often skipped meals so Sophia could eat. Where had this beautiful ring come from? Why was her mother hiding it? A clear thought flashed in Sophia's mind. The ring must be worth money. Enough money to buy medicine. Sophia glanced toward her mother's room. The door was closed, and she could hear Jessica's heavy breathing. She had finally fallen asleep. Determined, Sophia put the ring in her coat pocket and quietly took the keys from the door. She hesitated. She had never gone out alone before. Jessica always said it was dangerous, but now her mom needed her. She took a deep breath and stepped outside. The outside world seemed enormous. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray. Sophia walked along the wet sidewalks past passers-by who barely noticed the little girl. She didn't know where to go. She had heard of places where they buy jewelry, but she didn't know where to find them. After walking several blocks, Sophia found herself in the city center. Shops, restaurants, and hurrying people. Her gaze scanned the crowd, looking for someone kind who might help. And then she saw him, a tall man with dark hair, silvered with gray at the temples. He was in a gray suit that looked expensive and held a leather briefcase. He walked alone, checking his expensive watch with a serious expression. Something about him caught Sophia's attention. Maybe the way he walked, as if carrying an invisible burden on his shoulders, or simply because he looked rich and money was exactly what she needed. Sophia took a deep breath and crossed the street, stopping in front of the man. He nearly collided with her, so absorbed in his thoughts. "Please, sir." Her voice trembled. "Give me any amount. I need to save my mom." Mark Sullivan looked down, surprised to see a little girl with brown hair and eyes too serious for her age. For a moment, he thought about continuing on. He was already late for an important meeting, and the city was full of people asking for money. "Sorry, kid," he said. But Sophia extended her open hand, showing the ring. "Please, it's beautiful. It's worth money. My mom is very sick." Distracted, Mark took the ring to examine it closer. and in that moment the world stopped. His fingers trembled slightly as he held the ring. He recognized it immediately. The small blue sapphire, the delicate shape, the engraving inside. He turned the ring to the light to confirm what his heart already knew. Jessica M. Moore. The air left his lungs as if he had been punched. Suddenly, tears welled up in his eyes, and he turned away so the girl wouldn't notice, pretending to wipe something away. That name, how many years had passed? 6, 7? The name he had tried to bury along with all the memories and feelings associated with it. Mark looked at the girl with new eyes. Wavy brown hair like Jessica's, a stubborn chin, and something familiar in her gaze that squeezed his heart. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice suddenly hoarse. "Sophia," she replied, warily noticing the change in his behavior. Sophia, that was the name Jessica had once said she wanted to give to a daughter. Mark felt something tighten in his stomach. "And your mom?" "She's Jessica. Jessica Moore." The girl's eyes widened. "You know my mom?" she asked. Mark didn't answer. His mind raced. The girl's age, the time since he and Jessica had parted. "Where's your mom?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "At home, sick. I wanted to sell the ring to buy medicine." Mark knelt down to Sophia's level, gripping the ring so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Take me to her." It wasn't a question, almost a plea. Sophia hesitated. Her mother always told her not to trust strangers. But this man knew her mom, and he had sad eyes. Besides, she had already sneaked out of the house and didn't know what else to do. Maybe this man could really help? "Is it far?" Mark asked, already mentally canceling all his meetings for the day. "Not very." Sophia pointed in that direction. Mark took Sophia's small hand and let her lead him. With each step, his heart beat faster. Important meetings, contracts, the empire he had built, all faded from his mind. Now, in his pocket was the ring, and in his hand a little girl. The path Sophia had walked alone seemed much shorter on the way back. Soon, they approached an old building with peeling paint and a broken elevator. Sophia led him up the stairs to the 4th floor. "Here," she said, stopping at door number 403. Mark felt his heart pounding in his throat as Sophia opened the door. The apartment was smaller than he had imagined. A living room that barely fit a worn sofa and a small table, a tiny kitchen, and doors he assumed led to bedrooms. "Mom's in there." Sophia pointed to one of the doors. Mark approached slowly. Part of him wanted to turn back, pretend nothing was happening, return to his organized, controlled life. But his feet carried him to the door. He knocked softly. No answer. "She's probably sleeping," Sophia explained, passing by and opening the door. "Mom, I brought someone who knows you." The room was small. It held only a bed, a nightstand, and a dresser. On the bed, covered with a thin sheet, lay Jessica. Mark felt a jolt seeing her. She was thinner than he remembered. Her face pale, hair disheveled, but it was still her. It was Jessica. She slowly opened her eyes, disoriented from the fever. "Sophia, who are you talking to, dear?" Her voice was weak. Her eyes met Mark's, and at first, she seemed not to recognize him. Then realization came, along with shock. "Mark!" She tried to sit up, but she was too weak. "Don't strain yourself," he said, stepping closer to the bed. "Sophia found the ring and showed it to me." Jessica looked at her daughter in confusion. "Soph, where did you—" she began, but a new coughing fit interrupted her. Mark needed nothing more to make a decision. He stepped forward and touched Jessica's forehead. It was burning hot. "You need a doctor," he said firmly. "I'll take you to the hospital."
"No," Jessica weakly protested.
"We can't afford it." "I'll pay," Mark interrupted, "and it's not up for discussion." He turned to Sophia. "Pack a few things for Mom. A change of clothes, a toothbrush, something quick." Sophia, sensing the urgency in his voice, ran to do as asked. Mark looked at Jessica, trying to maintain composure and hide how deeply shocked he was. Seeing her so sick, in such a modest place, so different from the life he had imagined for her. And with a daughter possibly. "Why did you come back?" Jessica asked almost in a whisper. Mark didn't answer. How could he explain that he had never truly left? That even after all these years, after everything that happened, her name could still stop his heart? Sophia returned with a small bag. I took Mom's things and the medicines that ran out, she said. Mark nodded, took the bag, and carefully helped Jessica stand. She was too light and fragile. He lifted her into his arms effortlessly. Oh, no need, she protested, but her head fell against his chest, too weak to resist. Sophia, open the door, Mark asked, and the girl ran ahead. They slowly descended the stairs. Mark carried Jessica as if she were made of glass. On the street, he hailed a taxi, which stopped immediately. To St. Mary's Hospital, he told the driver. During the ride, Mark held Jessica in his arms, while Sophia sat beside them, anxiously watching her mother. In the taxi window, a strange family was reflected. Who is he, Mom? Sophia asked quietly. Jessica looked at Mark. Their eyes met for the first time in many years. An old friend, she said. Mark felt the weight of those words. An old friend. That's how she saw him now, after everything they had once meant to each other. But he stayed silent. Now wasn't the time for explanations. The main thing was for Jessica to get the medical help she needed. The rest, questions, explanations, lost years, could wait. The taxi pulled up to the hospital entrance, and Mark got out, carrying Jessica with Sophia following. In the emergency room, one word from him was enough for Jessica to receive immediate care. As doctors and nurses surrounded her and wheeled her away on a gurney, Sophia stayed with Mark in the waiting area. She looked up at the tall, serious man who somehow knew her mother and was now helping them. Will you make Mom better? Sophia asked. Mark looked into her big, trusting eyes, just like his own, and a face that was undoubtedly Jessica's. A strange heaviness settled in his chest. Guilt, regret, or something else without a name. I'll do everything I can, he promised. Sitting side by side on the plastic chairs in the waiting room, Mark and Sophia waited for news. He glanced at the girl from time to time, searching for features that confirmed clues to the truth he wasn't yet ready to fully face. Meanwhile, the engagement ring lay heavy in his pocket, a symbol of promises given and broken, of a past he thought he had buried, but which now, thanks to a simple encounter on a busy sidewalk, had resurfaced and turned his life upside down. Mark knew nothing would be the same. The important meeting, his business, his comfortable but empty life, all seemed distant, as if belonging to someone else. Here, next to this little girl with eyes too serious for her age, he was back in the only place where his heart truly lived, with Jessica Moore. He just didn't know if there would be a place for him in this new life he was discovering. Could the mistakes of the past be forgiven? Could lost time be reclaimed? But for now, that didn't matter. The main thing was to be there to help in any way. The rest, the truth, difficult conversations, uncertain future, would come later. Mark spent the entire night in an uncomfortable chair in the hospital waiting room. His neck ached, his back hurt, but he couldn't leave. Every 30 minutes, he got up and approached the door to the room where Jessica lay, to check if she was still sleeping. Sophia finally fell asleep next to him. Her small head rested on his arm. Mark was afraid to move so as not to wake her. Looking at the child's peaceful face, he saw even more similarities. The shape of the nose, the curve of the eyebrows, features that took his breath away. The hospital staff distributed breakfast, and the smell of toast and coffee woke Sophia. She rubbed her eyes and for a moment was disoriented. "Mom," she asked, still sleepy. "She's still sleeping," Mark replied gently. "The doctor said she'll feel better soon." Sophia nodded, accepting the information with childlike simple faith. Mark offered her a sandwich and juice he had bought. "Are you hungry?" She took the sandwich. Her eyes lit up, but she didn't start eating right away. Instead, she looked at the door to the room where her mom was. "Will Mom eat when she wakes up?" she asked. "Of course, they'll bring her food too," Mark replied. Sophia looked uncertain, then tore the sandwich in half, putting one piece in her coat pocket. "What are you doing?" Mark asked curiously. "Saving it for Mom," she replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She's always hungry when she wakes up. Something tightened in Mark's chest. Such a small, automatic gesture from a 5-year-old child, already accustomed to sharing everything, thinking of her mom first. You can eat the whole thing, he said gently. I'll buy another sandwich for Mom when she wakes up. Sophia looked at him suspiciously, as if deciding whether to believe him or not. Are you sure? It costs money. Of course, Mark confirmed, holding back the urge to ask more, to understand how much they had both suffered. As they ate, Mark tried to find a way to talk to Sophia. It was strange. He could handle multimillion-dollar negotiations without hesitation, but he didn't know how to talk to a child, especially if that child might be his daughter. He cleared his throat. Do you go to school? Sophia nodded, finishing her juice. Yes, I do. I'm in kindergarten. Mom works while I'm there. What does your mom do? She cleans houses, Sophia replied, taking a sip of juice. 3 different houses, and in the evenings, when she puts me to bed, she sews things to sell. Mark absorbed this information like a blow. Jessica cleaning houses, sewing late into the night to feed her daughter. A life so different from the promising career she had when they met. What do you do on weekends? He asked. Sophia's eyes lit up. We go to the park. It's free. Mom brings a blanket and we have a picnic. Sometimes, if there's extra money, we buy ice cream. She enthusiastically told about Sunday walks in the park, how her mom pushed her on the swings, told stories about the clouds in the sky. Small moments of happiness that cost nothing. And on cold evenings, Sophia continued, we build forts with blankets in the living room. Mom lights candles because it's cheaper than turning on the lamp. And we tell stories about princesses. With each word from Sophia, new details of their simple life emerged. The daily sacrifices Jessica made. Mark thought of his own penthouse apartment, expensive dinners in restaurants, designer clothes. All that wealth seemed empty and cold compared to blanket forts and princess stories by candlelight. Your mom seems amazing, he said, feeling his words were inadequate. She's the best mom in the world, Sophia replied firmly. But sometimes she's sad. Mark leaned forward slightly, trying not to seem too interested.
Sad?
Why? Sophia shrugged. An unexpectedly adult gesture for such a small child. Sometimes I wake up at night and see her crying. When I ask what's wrong, she says she has dust in her eye. There's no dust at night, right? No, Mark agreed, feeling a lump in his throat. And she keeps a photo in her desk drawer, Sophia continued. I saw it once when I was looking for socks. It's a photo of Mom with a man. They're both smiling a lot. Mark felt his heart beat faster. He knew exactly which photo it was, taken in front of the Eiffel Tower in Paris. He had planned to propose during that trip but ended up postponing it, not being sure. A mistake that now seemed colossal to him. Do you know who the man in the photo is? He asked almost in a whisper. Sophia shook her head. I've never seen him before. Mom doesn't talk about him. Silence fell between them. Mark looked at the child, seeing so many of Jessica's features, but now noticing others too. The shape of the jaw so like his own, or the way she frowned when thinking just like him. Do you have kids? Sophia suddenly asked. The question caught Mark off guard. No, he replied, feeling the weight of that single word. I don't. So you're alone? Yes, Mark admitted. I have a big house, but I live alone. Sophia thought for a moment, tilting her head. That must be sad. Mom says, we may have little, but we have each other and that's what matters. The child's simple words hit Mark harder than any eloquent speech. An adult life surrounded by professional successes and material comfort had never filled the void left by Jessica. He had never found anything that meant as much to him as what they once had. And now, listening to Sophia, he began to understand that he might have missed not only Jessica but also this child. A smart, caring child who saved half a sandwich for her mom and considered blanket forts magical. Your mom must be very brave, he said. Yes, Sophia agreed proudly. When we don't have money for rent, she says she'll figure something out and always does. When I'm sick, She stays up with me all night, and even when she's very tired, she never forgets to read me a bedtime story. With each new revelation, something awakened in Mark. Guilt, regret, but also admiration. Admiration for Jessica for raising this wonderful child alone, facing hardships he could barely imagine. And your dad. The words escaped him before he could stop. Do you know him? Sophia shook her head. Mom says he left before he even knew about me. Mark felt the force of those simple words. Before he even knew about me. So Jessica had never told him, never given him the chance to choose to take responsibility or not. Or maybe she had tried, and he was too busy with his ambitions and pain after their breakup to truly listen. But she says he's not a bad person, Sophia added, surprising Mark. He just made a different choice. Your mom said that? He asked. Yes, Sophia replied. I once asked if he was like the villains in fairy tales. Mom said, no, he just chose a different path, not ours. Mark swallowed hard, touched by Jessica's generosity in speaking about him to their daughter. She could have painted a horrible picture, filled Sophia with resentment, but instead, she left the door open for the future, for the possibility of redemption. I'd like to meet him someday, Sophia said, playing with the straw from her juice, just to know what he's like. Mark couldn't force his voice to respond. Instead, he just nodded, feeling his heart open in a new, unfamiliar way. This little girl before him was no longer just Jessica's daughter, a coincidence or a painful reminder of the past. She was Sophia, a full-fledged person with dreams and needs, with surprising wisdom for such a young age. A child who lived in poverty but understood what truly mattered. A nurse entered Jessica's room door. The patient is awake and asking about her daughter. Sophia jumped from her chair, excited. Can I go to Mom? Of course, dear. The nurse smiled, leading her into the room. Sophia turned to Mark. Will you stay here until Mom gets better? In that simple question, there was so much hope, so much trust in her eyes, that Mark felt something change inside him. A decision formed clearly and inevitably. I'll stay, he promised. As long as it takes. Sophia smiled a smile that lit up the whole world and ran into the room to her mother, leaving Mark with his thoughts, discoveries, and the beginning of a path home that he didn't even know he was seeking. Jessica settled into the hospital bed, feeling a bit better after the 4-drip. Her fever had subsided, her mind cleared. She looked at Sophia, curled up asleep in the chair by the bed, and smiled. Her daughter had always been so strong. She looked around. The room was simple but clean and comfortable. Better than any public hospital where she was usually treated. How had she ended up here? Memories were jumbled. She remembered being at home, burning with fever, then someone carrying her. A familiar voice, a face that seemed like a dream. The room door slowly opened, and Jessica turned her head, expecting to see a nurse. Her heart skipped a beat. In the doorway stood Mark Sullivan, holding a cup of coffee. He was older than in her memories, with gray at the temples, but it was him. The same tall stature, the same green eyes, the same confident manner. Only now there was something different in his gaze. Hesitation, which she had never seen before. You're awake, he said quietly, so as not to wake Sophia. Emotions flooded Jessica. Shock, fear, anger, and something deeper that she refused to name. Her body tensed. Her hands gripped the sheet tightly. What are you doing here? The words came out harsher than she intended. Mark entered the room, quietly closing the door behind him. He kept his distance, as if knowing his presence was unwelcome. Sophia found me, he explained, glancing briefly at the sleeping girl. She was trying to sell this. He pulled the ring from his pocket and placed it on the bedside table. Jessica looked at the jewelry as if it were a venomous snake. She shouldn't have done that, she muttered, more to herself than to him. She was worried about you, said she needed money for medicine. Jessica closed her eyes for a moment, feeling tears well up behind her eyelids. Of course, Sophia had done that. Her daughter always tried to protect her, even though she was so young. But that doesn't explain why you're here. Jessica opened her eyes. avoiding Mark's gaze. You could have called an ambulance and left. Mark took a step forward, then back as if walking a minefield. You were very sick, pneumonia. According to the doctors, I couldn't just leave. Of course you could. Jessica laughed dryly with a bitter smirk. You've always been good at leaving, Mark. The accusation hung between them. Mark didn't respond immediately, taking a sip of coffee to buy time. I know you have every right to be angry, he finally said. I'm not angry. The icy tone of her voice contradicted her words. It's been so long. I don't care anymore. There was no more lying. They both knew it was a lie. The tension between them was thick, filled with years of unspoken words, accumulated grievances, and unhealed pain. Sophia stirred in the chair, mumbling in her sleep. Jessica and Mark both looked at her, and their faces softened at the sight of the child. Sophia loves you, Jessica said, as if it were an accusation. She's an amazing girl, Mark replied sincerely. Smart, sensitive. Jessica nodded slightly, a brief moment of agreement. Yes, she is. Silence fell between them again, heavy with everything left unsaid. How long? Mark finally asked. How long what? Jessica asked. How long after our breakup did you find out about her? Jessica glanced at Sophia, assessing if it was safe to speak, but the girl continued to sleep soundly. 3 weeks, she said almost in a whisper. I found out 3 weeks later. Mark closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the blow. Why didn't you tell me? The question hung in the air, heavy with accusation. Jessica felt anger surge again, a hot wave sweeping everything in its path. Tell you? She replied, barely keeping her voice down. After what you did, after how it all ended. Tell you? Tell me? Mark repeated, not letting her finish. I had a right to respect, to love, to not be betrayed, Jessica said, feeling tears ready to break through, though she refused to cry in front of him. Don't talk to me about rights, Mark. He ran a hand through his hair, an expression of frustration she knew too well. It was a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life. Which one? Jessica asked with venom. The cheating or letting me go? But 6 years spent alone with her daughter, sleepless nights, unpaid bills, and shattered dreams gave her the right to be bitter. Both, Mark replied quietly. I was young, stupid, and selfish, and I've been paying for it every day since. Jessica let out a cold, joyless laugh. You're paying with your penthouse and imported car. She looked at his expensive suit. Sorry if I don't shed tears for you. Mark didn't defend himself. Instead, he looked at Sophia again. She's my daughter, isn't she? Jessica didn't answer right away. Part of her wanted to lie, to deprive him of that certainty, that connection. But what was the point? Sophia was here, living proof with green eyes so like his. Yes, she finally admitted. She's your daughter. The confirmation seemed to hit Mark physically. He swayed slightly, leaning harder against the wall. I have a daughter? He murmured almost to himself. All this time, Jessica interrupted sharply, firm and unwavering. You contributed the genetic material, Mark said. I have a daughter. I'm the one who rocked her every night, who held her hand on her first day of school, who worked 3 jobs to give her the bare necessities. The words were harsh, but Jessica couldn't hold back the bitterness after everything she had been through. You're right, Mark admitted, surprising her. You did all that alone, and I can never make up for it. But I'm here now. And what does that mean? Jessica asked wearily. You think you can just show up after 6 years and suddenly be a father? That you can buy your way back into our lives? I'm not trying to buy anything, Mark said. Frustration was evident in his voice. I'm just trying to help. We don't need your help. Clearly you do, he replied, gesturing around the hospital room. You had pneumonia, Jessica. Sophia was so desperate she went out alone to try to sell the ring. Jessica turned away, feeling the sting of truth in his words. Yes, it had been hard. Yes, sometimes almost impossible. But she had her pride, and that was all she had left after he left. What do you want, Mark? Money to ease your conscience?
A formal introduction. I, supia.
Here's your dad who never bothered to look for you. I didn't know, he said through gritted teeth. How could I look for someone I didn't even know existed? Jessica closed her eyes, feeling exhaustion. The medications were still working, and this conversation was draining her last strength. Leave, Mark. Thank you for bringing me to the hospital. But now leave. What about Sophia? What about her? She deserves to know who I am. Jessica looked at her sleeping daughter. Sophia had always asked about her father. There was always that curiosity in her eyes when she saw other children with their dads. A barely hidden desire to have what others had. Maybe, she agreed, but not now. Not like this. Mark nodded slowly, accepting the temporary defeat. I respect your decision, but I won't disappear again. You didn't disappear the first time, Jessica corrected. I drove you away, and for good reasons. The pain in his eyes was undeniable, but Jessica refused to let it affect her. She had cried too long because of Mark Sullivan. She had built walls around her heart, brick by brick, year by year. She wasn't going to let him tear them down in one day. The doctor said you might be discharged tomorrow. Mark changed the subject. But you'll have to continue treatment at home. I can't pay for that, Jessica admitted, hating the vulnerability in her own voice. I've already taken care of everything. I didn't ask. You didn't ask, he interrupted. Sophia did, and I won't deny her anything. Jessica bit her lip, torn between pride and practical necessity. For herself, she would have refused any help from Mark, but for Sophia, she swallowed her pride. Only the treatment, she conceded. Nothing more. Mark nodded, apparently satisfied with this small victory. I'll let you rest, he said, heading to the door. I'll be nearby if you need anything. Before Jessica could respond, Sophia stirred in the chair, opening sleepy eyes. Mr. Mark? She murmured, sitting up. You're still here. His face changed completely. All fatigue and tension vanished, replaced by a genuine smile Jessica hadn't seen in years. Yes, Soph, he replied softly. I was just talking to your mom. Sophia turned to Jessica. Her eyes shone. Mommy, are you better? Yes, my dear, Jessica smiled, opening her arms so her daughter could jump from the chair and hug her. Mark watched them from the doorway, an outsider looking at a world that could have been his. Jessica met his gaze over Sophia's head. There was no forgiveness there, at least not yet. But there was a silent truce for the sake of the little girl they both loved in their own way. I'll come back later, he said quietly, leaving the room. Jessica held Sophia tightly, burying her face in her hair to hide the tears that finally began to flow. Years of anger and pain wouldn't disappear in one night, but for the first time, a small crack appeared in the wall she had built. Tiny, almost imperceptible, but it was there. And through that crack, one ray of light broke through. Every time Mark appeared on the fourth day afternoon, Jessica was asleep, exhausted from the medications. Mark quietly entered the room, carrying a small bag. Sophia, he whispered, sitting on the chair next to the bed where the girl was flipping through an old magazine. I brought something for you. Sophia's eyes widened as he pulled out a box of colored pencils and a new drawing pad from the bag. This is for me? She asked quietly, glancing at her sleeping mother, as if afraid the gift would disappear if Jessica woke up. Of course, Mark smiled. I thought we could draw together. What do you think? Sophia nodded enthusiastically and carefully accepted the pad, as if it were made of crystal. Mark noticed how she slowly opened it, savoring the smell of new paper. At school, we only have broken pencils, she said, opening the box of pencils. And we have to share paper. Mark felt the familiar pain in his chest. Each new detail about Sophia's life was a small blow, reminding him of everything he had missed and what she had never had. Well, this is all yours, he assured her. No need to share. Sophia looked at him seriously, that strangely adult gaze he had seen several times already. But I like sharing, she said. I just don't like when other kids break the crayons. Mark smiled, recognizing in those simple words the generous spirit he had noticed in Sophia from the beginning. "And what do you like to draw?" he asked, pulling his chair closer. "Houses," Sophia replied eagerly. "I like drawing big houses with gardens. Let's draw one." For the next hour, they drew side by side. Sophia created a vibrant house with a garden full of flowers, a swing on a tree, and lots of windows. Mark tried to follow her example, but it was obvious he hadn't drawn in decades. "Your drawing is funny," Sophia noted without malice, looking at his crooked little house. Mark laughed. "I've never been good at this." "That's okay," Sophia said. "Mom says you don't have to be good at everything. The important thing is to try." That simple wisdom caught him off guard. Mark glanced at Jessica, still sleeping nearby, and wondered how many such lessons she had passed on to Sophia over the years. Lessons he had missed. Sophia started a new drawing, sticking her tongue out of the corner of her mouth in concentration. Mark watched her every movement, every expression with interest, searching for traces of himself and finding them in the determined grip on the pencil, in the slight tilt of her head when she thought deeply. "Do you work a lot?" Sophia suddenly asked, not taking her eyes off the drawing. "Yes," Mark admitted. "Maybe too much. Like Mom." Sophia nodded. "She works a lot too. Sometimes falls asleep at her sewing machine." Mark glanced at Jessica's hands and for the first time noticed the small marks. Needle pricks, calluses from manual labor. Hands that had fought alone for Sophia's life. "Your mom is very strong," he noted. Sophia nodded. "She says you have to be strong when things get tough." They sat in silence for a few minutes. The only sound was pencils scratching on paper. Mark thought about all the times he had complained about stress at work, long meetings, tiring trips, living in absolute comfort. What did he really know about hardship? Sophia interrupted his thoughts, looking at him again with a serious expression. "Do you have kids?" The question surprised Mark, though perhaps it shouldn't have. A child naturally asks an adult, but for Mark, this question carried the weight of 6 years of unintentional absence. "No," he hesitated, feeling every heartbeat. "I've never had any." Sophia's eyes, so like his, studied him for a moment. Then she smiled sadly, seeming 10 years older. "I didn't have a dad either." Mark felt the impact of those simple words. He wanted to say something, anything, but his throat tightened with emotion. "Mom says he left before he even knew about me," Sophia continued, returning to her drawing as if talking about the weather. "But sometimes I think maybe he would think I'm good." Mark swallowed hard, fighting the urge to hug her and tell her everything right now. But he knew it wasn't his decision to make alone. Jessica was right. Sophia deserved to know the truth, but not like this. Not while everything was so fragile. "I'm sure he would think you're wonderful," Mark managed to say. His voice was a bit hoarse. Sophia smiled, pleased with the answer. "Mom says that too. She says any father would be proud of me." "Your mom is right," Mark agreed. Looking at Jessica, still sleeping, he felt a deep sense of gratitude for how she had raised such a wonderful daughter despite all the hardships and despite never telling him the truth. A child who somehow wasn't poisoned against her absent father. "You can be my friend since you don't have kids," Sophia offered, pushing a few colored pencils toward him. "I picked your favorites." Mark took the pencils. Blue, green, brown, and realized those were exactly the colors he would have chosen. "Thank you, Sophia. I'd be happy to be your friend." They continued drawing in pleasant silence. For the first time in several days, maybe years, Mark felt relaxed. There was something strangely therapeutic about just sitting and drawing with a child. No expectations, no pressure. Just the present moment. "I'm done," Sophia announced, flipping the pad to show the drawing. It was a house bigger than the first, with an even lusher garden. But what caught Mark's attention were the 3 figures standing in front of the house. A woman, a girl, and a tall man. "Is that a family?" he asked quietly. Sophia nodded. "An imaginary family. Mom, a girl like me," she hesitated, glancing at Mark, "and someone who takes care of them." Something shifted inside Mark, as if a locked door began to open. It was no longer just guilt or regret, not just the shock of revelation. It was something deeper, a fundamental realization that this child, with her drawings and gentle wisdom, was part of him. "That's a beautiful drawing, Sophia," he said softly. "Can I keep it?" "Of course," she agreed easily. "We can draw more tomorrow. Tomorrow and every day you want," Mark promised. For the first time in his adult life, he made a promise he was absolutely sure he would keep. On the other side of the room, Jessica opened her eyes for a moment, watching them bent over the pad. She closed them again before they noticed, but one tear slipped down her cheek. She had been pretending to sleep, listening to their interaction. Mark never mentioned money or status in his responses. Instead, he told funny stories about places he had visited, people he had met, and lessons he had learned. After dinner, Sophia asked to watch a cartoon on the small TV in the living room. Jessica agreed, and soon the girl was fully immersed in her favorite show. Mark started washing the dishes, and Jessica, without thinking, took a towel to dry them. They worked in silence for a few minutes, moving carefully in the tight space. Jessica finally broke the silence. "Mark," quietly so Sophia wouldn't hear from the other room. "We need to talk." Jessica felt tension in her body but nodded. She knew this moment would come sooner or later. They had avoided serious conversations the past few days, focusing on her recovery and Sophia's well-being. "I know," she replied simply. They finished the dishes in silence. Jessica peeked into Sophia's room. The girl was still absorbed in the cartoon. "Let's go to the hallway," she suggested, taking the keys to talk so she wouldn't hear. The hallway in the building was empty and quiet. Jessica leaned against the wall opposite the apartment door, leaving it slightly ajar to hear if Sophia called. Mark stood in front of her, maintaining a respectful distance. In the confined space, he seemed even taller, but his posture was cautious, almost hesitant. "Sophia is my daughter, isn't she?" he asked directly, but his voice held tenderness. Jessica looked down at the floor. Though they had touched on this question in the hospital, she had never given a clear and final confirmation. Part of her still wanted to protect herself, to protect Sophia, to keep control over the situation she had managed alone for so long. "Jessica, please," Mark insisted gently when she remained silent. "I need to hear it from you." She raised her eyes and met his gaze. "Yes," she finally said. "Sophia is your daughter." Mark closed his eyes for a moment, as if absorbing the final force of this truth. When he opened them, they were moist. "Why did you never tell me?" His voice was a hoarse whisper. Jessica felt the old pain rising. Years of hurt and resentment she had tried to bury for Sophia's sake. "You were bad to me, Mark. You didn't care. You cheated on me several times." The words poured out like a bursting dam. "I loved you, but in the end, I couldn't take the pain anymore, the loneliness in those relationships." She took a deep breath, holding back tears. "Shortly after I found out I was pregnant, I decided to raise Sophia alone. I didn't want her to go through what I went through." Mark recoiled as if physically struck. Tears streamed down his face, and he didn't try to hide them. "I had a right to know," he said. His voice trembled. "Regardless of what happened between us, I had a right to know. I had a right to know I have a daughter, and she had a right to a father who would be there." Jessica's voice shook. "Not one who puts her second, like you did to me." Mark ran a hand over his face, wiping away tears. "How could you be so sure I'd do that? You never gave me a chance to prove otherwise. I had 6 years of experience with you before her birth," Jessica said. "You already showed me your priorities." Heavy silence fell between them. Mark stared at the floor. His shoulders slumped. "I was young and stupid," he finally said. "Obsessed with success, recognition. I thought I was building something for us, but in the process I destroyed what we had." He met Jessica's gaze, her eyes red from held-back tears. "I'm not justifying who I was. There's no excuse for what I did to you. But, Jessica, if I had known about Sophia, I would have changed. I would have at least tried." There was sincerity in his voice that made something in Jessica tremble. "You can't know that," she said more softly. "No, I can't," he agreed. But I know who I am now, and I know I'd give everything, every achievement, to be there for her, to see her first steps, hear her first words, know her from the beginning. Tears streamed down his face, and Jessica felt her own tears flow freely. I lost 6 years of her life, Mark continued. His voice broke. 6 years I'll never get back. I don't blame you. You did what you thought was right to protect her. But I ask, no, I beg. Jessica interrupted. Don't make me lose more. She closed her eyes, torn by conflicting feelings. Old pain, fear of being hurt again, protective instinct for Sophia. But now there was something else. The image of Sophia laughing with Mark. How her eyes lit up when he appeared. The genuine care he showed. I don't know if I can trust you, she admitted. At least not with me, but maybe with Sophia. Relief on Mark's face was palpable. That's all I'm asking, he said. A chance to be the father she deserves. I won't let her down, Jessica. I won't let both of you down. Don't make promises you can't keep, Jessica warned. This is a promise I intend to keep with every breath, Mark replied with such force in his voice that it surprised her. But neither of them noticed the small figure at the slightly open apartment door. Sophia had quietly come out of the room, drawn by the voices in the hallway. Her big green eyes, so like Mark's, widened, absorbing every word of the revelation that would forever change her life. She quietly backed away, unnoticed by the adults. Her small steps made no sound on the carpet in the hallway. When she returned to the apartment, her child's mind tried to process what she had just heard. Mark, the man who had so suddenly appeared in their lives, who built towers with blocks with her and told stories, who made her mom cry when she thought no one was watching. He wasn't just a family friend. He was her dad. Sophia looked at the drawing she had made earlier, the imaginary family in front of the house. Now it all made sense, and yet nothing did. She grabbed her little blue backpack, put her one-eyed teddy bear in it, and quietly went out through the back door leading to the fire escape. Maybe if she found the place where she first met Mark, it would be easier to understand what was happening. Mark and Jessica stood in the hallway for a few more minutes, each processing the weight of the conversation that had just taken place. A strange tension hung between them. Not anger, but something different, deeper intensity. The truth had been revealed, and there was no going back. Time to go back, Jessica finally said, wiping the last traces of tears. Sophia will wonder why we're taking so long. Mark nodded and followed her into the apartment. Jessica opened the door, expecting to see Sophia still engrossed in the cartoon. The TV was on, but the living room was empty. Sophia, Jessica called, heading to the small bedroom. Dear. No response. Mark stood in the living room while Jessica checked the bathroom and kitchen, her anxiety growing with each second. She must be hiding, Jessica said. Panic crept into her voice for the first time. Sophia, this isn't funny. Come out. Mark started searching too, looking under the table, behind the sofa, in the kitchen cabinets, anywhere a small child could hide. Sophia, he called. His voice grew more anxious. Jessica was the first to notice the absence. The little blue backpack Sophia always left by the door was gone, as was the one-eyed teddy bear she never left behind. The back door, Jessica gasped, rushing to the kitchen. The door leading to the fire escape was unlocked. Cold night air wafted in quietly, stirring the curtains. Oh God, Jessica muttered. Her blood froze. She went out alone. Mark froze for a moment, realizing what that meant. A 5-year-old child alone in the night city. Horror spurred him into immediate action. We'll find her, he said firmly, despite the growing fear. She couldn't have gone far. Jessica had already put on her coat and was moving with incredible speed, ignoring her recent illness. She heard us, Jessica said. The horror of realization hit her like a blow. Sophia must have heard our conversation in the hallway. Mark felt the weight of that thought. His daughter, whom he had just discovered, had overheard everything. The confirmation that he was her father, the accusations, his tears of regret. How could a 5-year-old understand all that? You go to the front of the building, Mark instructed. already heading to the kitchen door. "I'll go down the fire escape. Call the police while we search," Jessica said, pulling out her phone with trembling hands. All the coldness and distance she had shown Mark over the past week disappeared. Now they were just two frightened parents, united by the fear of losing their child. Mark descended the metal steps, calling Sophia with every flight. The night was cold. The sky was covered with dark clouds threatening rain. He tried to push away horrible thoughts. Sophia lost and scared. Or worse. "Sophia," he shouted. His voice echoed in the alley behind the building. "Sophia, please, it's me, Mark." In the silence that followed, he realized that for Sophia, he had been nothing special until a few hours ago. Just her mother's friend who appeared suddenly. "Sophia, I'm your dad." The words sounded strange from his lips, but surprisingly true. "Please, where are you?" Jessica rushed along the street, crossing from one side to the other, asking every passerby if they had seen a little girl with wavy brown hair and a blue backpack. Most just shook their heads sympathetically and walked on. Some promised to keep an eye out. An elderly man mentioned seeing a child walking alone toward the city center but wasn't sure if it was a girl or a boy. With each minute, Jessica's despair grew. Her chest ached not from the recent pneumonia but from the horror gripping her heart. Sophia was her whole life, and the thought of losing her was unthinkable. The police finally arrived, asked questions, took notes, requested a recent photo. They promised to start searching immediately, but their professional faces didn't hide the seriousness of the situation. A small child alone at night in a big city, it was a priority and a high risk. Mark and Jessica met again at the building, both out of breath and with red eyes. "No trace in the back," Mark reported, running a hand through his hair in despair. "But I think I know where she might be." "Where?" Jessica asked, grasping at any thread of hope. "Maybe she went back to where we first met, to the main square, where she approached me with the ring." Jessica considered it for a moment. The idea seemed logical. Sophia had a surprisingly good sense of direction for her age. She knew how to get to school, the park, the corner store, and how to walk to the city center, where they sometimes went for free events or just to stroll. "Possibly," she agreed, already heading in that direction. "Let's go." They ran side by side through the streets, stopping at every corner to check all directions, asking passersby if they had seen Sophia. Rain began to fall, first lightly, then harder, complicating the search. "She'll get soaked," Jessica said. Her voice trembled with worry. She didn't even take a coat. Mark took off his coat and gave it to Jessica, who was shivering from cold and fear. "We'll find her," he promised, though the fear in his eyes contradicted the confidence in his voice. They continued walking, both drenched to the bone. Despair grew with every minute. The police were also searching for Sophia. Patrol cars drove through nearby streets, and officers on foot checked alleys and parks. When they reached the main square, Mark spotted something. A small figure sitting on a bench in the rain, clutching something to her chest. Even from afar, he recognized the wavy brown hair, now plastered to her head from the downpour. "There!" he shouted, pointing. "It's her." Jessica looked where he pointed and ran. Mark followed. Sophia lifted her head, hearing familiar voices. Her face was red and swollen from crying, and she clutched her now completely soaked teddy bear tightly. "Sophia!" Jessica cried. Her voice broke from relief and fear. "Oh God, Sophia!" The girl didn't move, her eyes wide. In her gaze was confusion mixed with deep sadness, too heavy for such a small child. Jessica reached her first, knelt down, and frantically checked if she was hurt. "Are you okay? Are you injured? Why did you run away? Never do that again." The words tumbled from her lips, intertwined with worry, relief, and anger. Sophia just looked at her mother, then at Mark, who stopped a few steps away. Rain poured on the three of them, but no one paid attention. "Why did you lie?" Sophia finally asked. Her small voice was barely audible over the rain's noise. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jessica felt tears mix with the rain on her face. How to explain something so complex to a child just beginning to understand the world? She began, not knowing how to continue. Mark stepped forward and knelt beside Jessica, at Sophia's level. Raindrops streamed down his face, but he seemed not to care. "It was my fault," he said. His voice was surprisingly clear despite the emotions. "I hurt your mom a long time ago before you were born. She was trying to protect you from me." Sophia stared at him intently. Her green eyes, so like his, glistened with tears she hadn't yet let fall. "Are you really my dad?" she asked directly. Mark felt his heart constrict. "Yes," he replied simply. "I'm your dad." Sophia hugged her bear tighter. "Why didn't you come to me earlier?" "Because I didn't know about you," Mark answered honestly. "If I had known, I would have come. I would have been there from the beginning." Sophia looked at Jessica, who nodded. Her lips trembled. "I didn't tell him, Sophia," she admitted. "And that was wrong."
I'm sorry.
The child processed their words. Her small face showed understanding beyond her years. Finally, she looked at Mark again. "Are you going to leave now that you know?" she asked. Fear was in her voice. "No," Mark replied firmly, gently touching her face for the first time as a father. "Never. I'll never stop looking for you, Sophia. I won't leave." Something in his unwavering tone seemed to break Sophia's last barriers. She threw herself around his neck, sobbing into his chest. Mark held her tightly. Tears flowed freely down his cheeks, mixing with the rain. Jessica watched them, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. Relief, guilt, fear, and something dangerously close to hope. Then she joined the embrace, wrapping around Sophia from behind and placing her hands on Mark's. For a moment, they were one, united by the child between them, the storm, soaked to the skin, and the shared fear they had just endured. The rain began to subside, but none of them moved. Sophia pulled back a little, looking at Mark with eyes too serious for a 5-year-old. "Are you going to do to me what you did to Mom?" she asked. Her voice trembled slightly. "Are you going to make me suffer?" The question hit Mark like a physical blow. It was so direct, so frank, and painfully insightful for such a small child. He felt Jessica tense beside him, probably waiting for his answer. Mark stayed on his knees in the rain, ignoring his soaked clothes, looking straight into her eyes that mirrored his own. "Never, Sophia," he said, his voice full of emotion but firm in conviction. "I can't change what I did, but I promise to spend the rest of my life trying to be better for you." Sophia placed her small hands on his cheeks, studying his face as if searching for the slightest sign of a lie. What she saw must have satisfied her, because a shy smile slowly appeared on her lips. "I've always wanted a dad," she said simply. Mark felt his heart break and somehow heal in that single moment. "And I've always wanted a daughter," he replied. "I just didn't know it until I met you." Jessica watched them, feeling both part of the scene and an outsider. Years of pain wouldn't disappear in one night, but seeing Mark and Sophia together, seeing the instant and deep bond between them, she began to wonder if it was time to let go of the past. "Let's go home," she said. "We're all soaked, and Sophia needs a warm bath." Mark looked at her, surprised and grateful for the silent invitation. "Let's go," he agreed, easily lifting Sophia into his arms. They walked back, Sophia's head resting on Mark's shoulder, her hand tightly holding Jessica's. The rain had finally stopped. Clouds began to disperse, revealing a starry sky, the first clear night in a long time. The apartment was quiet when they returned, all soaked and emotionally exhausted. Jessica immediately took Sophia to the bathroom, filled the tub with warm water, while Mark called the police to report they had found the girl. "They said they'll send someone to make sure she's okay," Mark reported when Jessica returned to the living room after putting Sophia to bed. "Thank you," Jessica said, rubbing her tired eyes, "for calling and helping find her." An awkward silence hung between them. The desperate unity they had shared during the search for Sophia faded, giving way to uncertainty. Now that the immediate crisis had passed, the truth was out, and there was no turning back. "What's next?" Mark asked quietly, trying not to wake Sophia. Jessica looked out the window, watching raindrops still sliding down the glass. I'm not sure, she admitted. But I know Sophia needs stability now. She's confused, scared. I want to be in her life, Mark said firmly. I want to know her, support her, be there. Jessica turned to him. Her face showed a mix of complex emotions. Sophia deserves that, she agreed. She deserves to have a father in her life. But we need time, she added. Time to believe you won't disappear when it gets hard. Time to believe Sophia is really your priority. Mark nodded slowly, accepting her terms. I understand, he said. And I'll prove it day by day. I'll prove I can be the father Sophia deserves. The police arrived soon, confirmed Sophia was safe, and gave recommendations for dealing with trauma after the incident. Mark stayed until Jessica fell asleep on the sofa, too tired to go to her bed. He covered her with a blanket, checked on Sophia one last time, and quietly left, promising to return in the morning. In the following week, a new routine began to form. Mark came every morning before going to the office. He brought coffee for Jessica and helped prepare breakfast for Sophia. At first, it was tense and wary. Jessica watched Mark's every move, every word to Sophia, as if expecting him to show his true face. But that moment never came. Instead, Mark began restructuring his life around Sophia, canceling business trips, delegating important tasks, arriving at the office later and leaving earlier. His phone, which used to be constantly in his hand, now remained forgotten in his pocket when he was with his daughter. Don't you need to be at work right now? Jessica asked one afternoon when Mark came to pick up Sophia from school, something he had started doing regularly. We rescheduled the meeting, he replied simply. I promised Sophia I'd take her to the park today. Jessica studied his face for resentment or impatience but found neither. Just sincere determination and a surprising calm she had never seen in him before. Over time, Jessica's defenses gradually weakened. She allowed Mark to take Sophia for entire afternoons, then a whole Saturday, and then weekends. He never let her down. Always punctual, always attentive to Sophia's needs, always respectful of Jessica's boundaries. A month passed, then 2, then 3. Winter gave way to spring, and with the changing season, something new began to bloom among the three of them. Mark met Sophia's teachers, memorized her friends' names, learned her favorite foods and bedtime stories. He discovered she was afraid of cockroaches, loved strawberry ice cream, and dreamed of someday having a dog. Each new detail was a precious treasure. Each moment spent together helped fill the void of lost years. There's something important I want to talk to you about, Mark added, noticing her hesitation. I can stay with Mrs. Miller, Sophia interjected, showing she had been listening despite appearing focused on homework. I can visit her kitten anytime. Jessica and Mark exchanged slightly amused glances, appreciating their daughter's convenient offer. Okay, Jessica finally agreed. Tomorrow evening. The next day, after Jessica dropped Sophia off at the neighbor's, she waited in the living room, feeling an unusual excitement. She chose a simple dress, more to break the routine than for any other reason she was ready to admit. Mark arrived right on time, also dressed with unusual care. He took her to a small, cozy Italian restaurant, nothing like the flashy places he used to frequent. You look beautiful, he noted when they were alone with 2 glasses of wine. Thank you, Jessica replied, taking a small sip to hide her embarrassment. So, what did you want to talk about? Mark smiled, noticing her impatience. Straight to business. Some things don't change, he began. Some? Yes, Jessica agreed, smiling involuntarily. And others change completely, he continued, meeting her gaze over the rim of his glass. We've changed, Jessica. A comfortable silence settled between them, not awkward like in the beginning of their meetings, but calm, like a pause in a familiar melody. Yes, we really have, Jessica finally said. I never thought we'd be here, talking like friends, and neither did I, Mark admitted. But I'm grateful we're here. Grateful you gave me a chance to know Sophia, to become part of her life. Jessica looked closely at his face, noticing the fine lines around his eyes and the gray at his temples. This was no longer the bold and impatient young man she once knew and loved. He had become different, more mature, more balanced. "What happened to you, Mark, over these years? What were we apart?" The question came naturally, without reproach, just from genuine curiosity. Mark looked down at his wine glass for a moment, as if searching for the right words. "After we broke up, I dove even deeper into work. I built a career, made money, achieved recognition." He paused, a sad smile on his lips. "Then one day, sitting in the office after closing the biggest deal of my life, I realized there was no one to celebrate it with. No one who truly cared." Jessica listened attentively, finally hearing the other side of the story they once shared. "It was like waking from a trance," Mark continued. "I realized I had lost the only person who truly mattered to me, chasing things that ultimately brought no real happiness." "And then you found Sophia," Jessica said softly. "Yes," he agreed. Emotions rang in his voice. "And I understood what really matters." At that moment, the food arrived, interrupting the conversation. They ate in silence for a few minutes, digesting what had been said. "And how about you, Jessica?" Mark finally asked. "How have these years been for you?" Jessica took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts. "Hard," she admitted, "but also full of joy thanks to Sophia. She was my anchor when I thought I couldn't go on, my light in the darkest days." Mark nodded, understanding. "I'm sorry you had to go through all that alone," he said sincerely. "If I had known," she began. "But you didn't know," Mark interrupted gently. "And I chose not to tell. We both made mistakes," Jessica said. "More me than you. Can we move forward?" Mark asked. Vulnerability was clear in his eyes. "Not forget the past, but maybe forgive it and use what we still have." Jessica felt strong emotions from his words. "Forgiveness is a path I'm just starting to walk." "I'm trying," she answered honestly. "Day by day, watching you and Sophia, how you change for her, and it helps." Mark smiled, the smile reaching his eyes. "There's something I want to show you," he said, smoothly changing the topic. "After dinner, if you don't mind." They finished dinner, talking about lighter things, shared memories, funny stories about Sophia at school. It was surprising that, despite everything, there was still some comfort in their familiarity. After dinner, Mark drove them to a quiet neighborhood on the city's outskirts with neat houses and tree-lined streets. He stopped in front of a two-story house with a large front yard and a cozy porch. "What is this?" Jessica asked, puzzled. "Come see," Mark replied, getting out of the car and opening her door. Intrigued, Jessica followed him to the front door. Mark pulled a key from his pocket and unlocked the door, inviting her in. Inside, it was spacious and cozy. Walls in soft shades, light parquet flooring, a large living room with a fireplace, an open kitchen with an island in the middle, big windows letting in lots of natural light. Everything looked perfect, though unfurnished. "Beautiful," she commented, still a bit puzzled. "But I don't understand." "I bought this house," Mark explained, watching her reaction closely. "For you too, so Sophia has a yard to play in, so you have a place to work on designs, and so we have a new start." Jessica felt her heart beat faster. "Mark, I can't accept this. It's too much." "I'm not giving it just to you," he clarified. "I'm giving it to us as a family, not as a couple, but as Sophia's parents. She deserves to grow up in a place like this." He toured her through the house, showing the rooms, explaining his ideas. Upstairs, he stopped at a closed door. "This will be Sophia's room," he said, opening it. Jessica held her breath. Unlike the rest of the empty house, this room was fully furnished. Light pink walls, a bed shaped like a carriage, a built-in bookshelf with brightly colored books neatly arranged, toys, and a row of teddy bears of different sizes and colors. A large window overlooked the backyard, where a swing hung from a big tree, waiting for children's laughter. "You did all this?" she asked, deeply touched. "I wanted it to be perfect for her," Mark replied. "For both of you." "Downstairs, there's a room that could be your studio," Mark continued. "And the master bedroom is yours, of course." "And you," Jessica finally asked, finding her voice. There's a small guest house in the back, he explained. I'll live there, to be close to Sophia but give you the space and privacy you need. Jessica didn't know what to say. The gesture was so generous it seemed frightening. Don't say anything now, Mark suggested gently. Think about it, talk to Sophia. 2 weeks later, on a sunny Sunday, the move was complete. Jessica agreed on the condition that she would contribute financially once her small design business started profiting. Sophia was thrilled with the new house, especially her dream room. There, Mark found her sitting on the swing in the yard, slowly swinging, holding something in her hands. Approaching, he saw it was the old engagement ring. The same ring Sophia had tried to sell when it all began. What are you doing with that, princess? He asked, sitting on the grass next to the swing. Sophia looked at the ring, twirling it in her fingers so the small sapphire caught the sunlight. I was thinking, she replied quietly but seriously, about how everything changed because of this. Mark looked at the jewelry, remembering the day he bought it, full of hopes and plans, not imagining what journey this small item would start. I think you're right, he agreed. It really changed everything. Sophia got off the swing and sat next to her father on the grass. Dad, Sophia said suddenly, in my class there's a girl, Sarah. Her mom has the same illness as Mom. She looked very sad. Mark looked at his daughter attentively, curious where she was going. That's sad, dear. Sophia opened her palm, showing him the ring lying on it. I want to give this to her, she declared, so she can sell it and help her mom, like I tried. Mark felt a lump in his throat from his daughter's innocent generosity. Sophia, that's very kind, but the ring is worth a lot of money. Maybe we can help Sarah another way. Sophia shook her head resolutely. Only the ring, Dad. It's magical. This ring saved my mom and saved you too. Mark didn't know what to say. His daughter's childlike view held a deep truth he couldn't put into words. With Jessica standing on the porch, he watched the father and daughter together. She slowly approached, interested in their serious conversation. What are you two plotting? She asked, stopping nearby. Sophia enthusiastically explained her plan to help her classmate, showing the ring. Are you sure? Jessica asked in surprise, hearing her daughter's intention. This ring is part of our story. Exactly, Sophia insisted. That's why it should help someone else to write a new story. Jessica and Mark exchanged glances over their daughter's head, both touched by the unexpected wisdom of this little person they had raised. If that's what you want, we'll do it together, Jessica agreed. Sophia hugged her mom, then her dad, and ran back to the swing, holding the ring tightly in her hand. Mark and Jessica remained standing side by side in the sunny yard. She's incredible, Mark noted, watching Sophia swing happily. Yes, Jessica agreed, not taking her eyes off her daughter. A comfortable silence fell between them, one possible only between people who had shared so much pain and joy, so many mistakes and chances for redemption. You've changed, Mark, Jessica finally said in a soft tone. I see it, she replied. It's not simple, but I'm ready to let you be close for our daughter. Mark nodded, too moved to speak right away. When he found the words, they were full of sincerity. That's more than I deserve, he said. I'll do everything to be worthy of this chance you're giving me. Mom, Dad, Sophia called from the swing. Push me. They exchanged smiles again. Not as a couple. Their story had ended many years ago, but as a family united by love for the little person calling them. Side by side, they walked to Sophia, to the future they were building step by step, choice by choice. Imperfect, complex but real, a future healed by their decisions, shaped not only by past mistakes but also by present commitments. True love can be quiet, imperfect, but when it finds courage, it restores homes, heals wounds, and turns remnants into something new and deeply beautiful. And for them, that